On August 14th, 1971, one of the most controversial psychological experiments occurred in history: the Stanford prison experiment. You're probably wondering, what is the big deal about the Stanford prison experiment? Well, the purpose of the Stanford prison experiment was to observe the behavioral changes of role assignments on people. Kind of like watching Robert Downey Jr. in Tropic Thunder. I'm just joking. This was encouraged by the questionable notion: is evil caused by the environment or the personalities in it? The American psychologist who conducted this experiment was Philip Zimbardo. Zimbardo was born on March 23rd, 1933 in New York. He's attended Yale University, Brooklyn College, and he's published about 30 books and is currently 87 years old. At the age of 38, he was recognized by the world for the Stanford prison experiment due to the questionable moral implications of his study. This experiment called for 24 normal college students who would be paid $15 a day for the participation, and after each subject was put through psychological tests for the purpose of questioning their mental capacity, the subjects were ready to start the experiment, but only 3 of the selected students decided not to contribute to the study. In the rules of the experiment, you were given the option of being a guard or an inmate. Whichever you choose, you were supposed to act as that role. The participants were given outfits to suit their roles. Guards were given sunglasses and batons. Inmates were stripped of their names and given numbers. Yeah. Every participant who contributed to this study never met each other before, which ensured the experiment would not be tainted by favoritism. Alright, I just want to break away for a second. Do you know the 4 purposes of prison? Well, there's retribution, there's deterrence, and then there's incapacitation, and then there's rehabilitation. Now, keep those in mind of what they mean. Other than that, back to the matter at hand. The time span of this experiment was meant to last 2 weeks, but sadly, due to the stressful environment of the study, it only lasted about 6 days. Of course, if this study was going to work, you needed a prison. So Zimbardo decided to utilize the basement of the Stanford Psychology Building and change it into a prison. Now, the interesting part about making this environment feel as real as possible for the participants playing inmates, each one was picked up from home by a real police officer and read their Miranda rights and handcuffed and delivered to the simulated prison. Wow. As for the participants who were playing guards, they were briefed by Zimbardo to regulate without causing any physical harm to the inmates, but make it as real as possible. Yet, they were not given any form of training on how to regulate the inmates, so they are purely going off of what they feel was necessary to uphold law and order. With that in mind, things can tend to get out of hand. Let's carry on. Of course, when it comes to putting a bunch of college teenagers in a simulated environment, they're not going to take it very seriously. The inmates were defiant upon listening to the commands of another student serving a fake uniform, until things changed. One of the guards took it upon himself to really invest as much effort into his character to make it feel as real as possible. He knows he cannot raise a hand to the inmates, so he yells, giving them orders to do exercises, restricting them of food, their beds, and waking them up at certain times in the night to purposely aggravate them. He even went as far as to forcing them to get naked, sing, and even put them in dark closets for isolation. Whew, that's a lot. Alright, back to it. His whole purpose in his mind was to make the experience for the students playing the inmates as unpleasant as possible, driving them into madness, not by physically hurting them, but by psychologically. Kind of like Scared Straight. Never mind. Because he was conducting his own little experiment at the time, he was evaluating how much stress it takes to make a normal person go crazy. In his mind, he was following what Zimbardo told him. Make it real. But with that excuse, he focused on the idea that the simulated prison should be real, which in his mind meant torture. Like, damn. As one of the guards kept insisting on making the inmates' lives a living hell, other guards fell in line and decided to go with the flow instead of questioning the actions of their fellow participants' morals. You're probably wondering, if the subjects are being heavily watched on cameras, how come Zimbardo didn't take control of the situation immediately? Well, he did not want to get involved with his experiment, because by interfering, he would be adjusting the minds of the guards and the inmates, which means he will be shaping the experiment into what he wants to see. But Zimbardo did have a role in his experiment, technically. He was the warden. Yet, he did not regulate when seeing how participants who were playing inmates were being treated horribly. Zimbardo even feels as if his role as warden took a hold on him and allowed the horrendous acts he was witnessing to go on. In the matter of 4 days, one of the subjects was showing signs of concern, such as feeling very ill, requesting the aid of a doctor, screaming to be let out, defying upon the guards' orders, and discussing how they were willing to take their own life just to be let out of the experiment. When the moment came for inmate 819 to be given an opportunity to be set free, as he and Zimbardo decided to discuss his release, fellow inmates were told to yell in synchronized fashion, "Prisoner 819 did a bad thing." When that moment occurred, he decided to stay. Convinced he wanted to show everyone that he was a good inmate, and broke down into tears. Zimbardo decided to comfort him and bring him back to reality, notifying him that the prison is not real and he is just a participant in an experiment. Once he was aware everything was fake, the participant left, with his seat to be filled by another volunteer. When the new participant stepped on the scene of the experiment, he was uncomfortable with the conditions of the inmates. Of course, he did not take the experiment seriously until confronted with the same guard who managed to turn the participant crazy. In just a matter of time, the inmate decided to go on a hunger strike to fight against the inhumane treatment that the guards were displaying. It has been reported a colleague of Zimbardo's, Christine Maslach, I'm not pronouncing that right, stepped in to see Zimbardo's experiment. And she was so disgusted of how these boys were being treated that Zimbardo came to his senses and shut down the experiment. So, as we can recall, this experiment only lasted about 6 days, and yet left some mental scars. It caught the eye of national news stations across the world, which is kind of crazy. And overall, wow. Now that I have shared this information with you, notify me if I got anything wrong, if I forgot something that should be added that's crucial to this experiment. Also, there's movies about this experiment. There's TED Talks about it that Zimbardo discusses. And yeah, this experiment was terrible off the bat. It failed, so clearly. And remember, the whole focus of it was, is evil created by the environment or by the personalities in it? So with that idea, I'd like to rant about this. No, that rant's not gonna happen. Mostly because I don't want to be keeping you here for about 20 minutes, and I took way too long to explain the Stanford prison experiment. So here we are. So next video, I will be discussing police brutality, wrongly incarcerated individuals, and making from what I've seen from those, how the Stanford prison experiment really shows us how it's so easy for abuse of power to take control. So anyways, like, comment, subscribe, have a good one, and see you next time.